Hi, this is Dada, Nabhaniilananda, also known as the Monk Dude, and I'm here with my friend Atiba or Akhilesh, and we're addressing questions about spiritual meditation. So this is a continuation of our Q&A. Actually, I get so many different questions about this. We could do this every week for a couple of months without running out. But we've got some great questions that some of you have submitted, so welcome, and let's launch into it. Akhilesh, what have you got from who? I'd like to know where they come from, and maybe which part of the world, or if they're in the US.
All right, we'll take a look here. First one was from Johnny Cass. Do you know Johnny, where he's from? On here it says the company is Solar Energy Consultant at Apex Solar Power.
I don't know where they're based, but thanks very much for your question, John.
All right, so Johnny's question says, question for Dada. Do you recommend immersive spiritual experience to enhance meditation practice? If so, what type, how, with whom, for how long, and at what points in the journey?
That's a really good question. And so there's quite a few things I can say about this. I'll just tell you a bit about my own experience, and then I'll tell you what I recommend. I began meditating on my own, learning from a book. And I was meditating every day, and I'd sit for about 20 minutes and try to figure out what I was doing. And after a few months of this, I decided to go on a personal retreat, because I realized, I thought, well, I want to be a yogi. I want to go into this more deeply, but I've never actually spent a day alone in my life. So I went away by myself for 3 days, stayed at a nice place by the beach. And I thought, I'm going to do a lot of meditation and really read a lot of spiritual philosophy. I took some good books with me. And after the first day, I began to feel lonely. And I thought, God, what kind of a yogi am I going to make if I can't be alone for a day without feeling lonely? So I sort of took a determination that evening that I said, I'm going to sit until I feel good. And I sat for an hour. I'd never sat for an hour before. I sat for a whole hour, and sure enough, I began to feel really good. And for the rest of that 3-day, retreat, I felt really great. But the thing that it taught me was, firstly, that I didn't know what I was doing. So I started looking for a teacher because I found when I was sitting there, okay, I had some ideas from these books I'd read, but I really didn't. I was struggling in the dark there. I didn't know what I was doing. So I went to look for a teacher after that. But I also realized that taking that extra effort and sitting for longer sometimes can can lead to a little breakthrough. It can take you through some kind of internal obstacle or something. So that was my first personal solo retreat, and I've been on a few of those since, which have always been really good, always very beneficial, sometimes for a whole week. But the other kind of intensive experience you can enjoy, and this is what I would recommend more for someone starting out on the path, is a retreat with a group. So some sort of we run weekend retreats. And the great thing about this is that even if you're a beginner, you benefit from the collective energy that's generated by other people, some of whom are more experienced than you. And there's some invisible thing that happens in a group meditation, especially if it's a group meditating together for a couple of days, and especially when you combine it with the chanting that we use. So you have group chanting and group meditation, and there's an energy there that can be pretty amazing. So that really builds up. So I would recommend, if you want to give your practice a big boost, to go on a weekend retreat. And with who? Well, if you're around, if you live near me, with me. It depends where you are. I can suggest good retreat places in many parts of the world. I know a lot of teachers all over the world, and I know some good retreat programs, but a lot depends where you are. We are holding, actually, if you're in the US, you might want to know, we're holding a 5-day intensive retreat over the New Year in Austin, Texas, or just next to Austin, Texas. And if you want to get your meditation off to a flying start, I highly recommend that. So if you want to know the details of that, you can post that in the chat, because that kind of event can make a huge difference. Oh, that reminds me. So the first collective retreat I went on was a few months after this first experience I recounted. So I found a teacher, and a monk like me. He was from Italy. I thought he was very wise. And I was meditating regularly, really enjoying it, getting into it pretty deeply. And then he suggested I come on this week. It was a 4-day retreat, I think, or 3 days, in the South Island of New Zealand. I lived in Wellington. We crossed to the South Island by ferry and went to a place called Nelson. It's quite a nice area. And there were about 40 people for 3 days doing a lot of chanting and meditation. And that was an amazing experience for me. It was incredible. And I remember when we were coming back from it, I was with this group of people that I'd only just met, most of them. And we were traveling back on the ferry. And we were all so high. It was like we were singing together all weekend. We were just full of this amazing kind of energy and joy. And I remember looking around at all the other people on the ferry, and I kind of felt like we were in color and they were in black and white. And I felt really touched. I thought, why is everybody so sad? And it really made me feel I want to share this with everybody, because it's right there waiting for you, inside. So it was a very powerful experience. So I don't know what's going to happen to you when you go on your first retreat, but I certainly would recommend that some sort of intensive, immersive meditation experience is something that you should do regularly, not just when you're beginning. But I of course I run these retreats, so I get to go on them all the time. But I particularly enjoy going on the ones where I have no responsibility, so I can just enjoy participating like everybody else, and it's always fantastic. The other thing I would add, as I said, my first retreat was a kind of solo retreat, and it was pretty hard. That kind of Himalayan yogi thing, going off into the cave, I wouldn't recommend you try that in the beginning unless you're really sort of inclined that way. That's something that you'll get more out of once you're more established in your practice. That is something I do now, and I've had remarkable benefits and experiences from that. But I would say that the group thing is probably going to be a lot better way for you to start out if you're going to go on an immersive experience.
All right, great. Well, I see there's a question that ties into that. So you ready for the next one?
Sure.
All right. The next one is by Rebecca. Rebecca is actually here in Oakland, California. And she asked, what's the most important tip you would give a newcomer?
Well, I always give more than one tip. So the most important one, I think it would be to use the practice of kirtan. So to explain, if you're not familiar with this, so kirtan means spiritual chanting. But the way that a lot of people practice it now is with music. So it's not just a kind of a drone, but it really can be very melodic, and the music can be very beautiful. And when you combine that with the mantras that you're singing, it can create this really wonderful mood that makes meditation so much easier. So if I had to pick one, it's really hard because there are many tips I can give you about meditation. But if I had to pick one, I would say sing kirtan, try and sing it with the group, or sing it alone, or listen to it before your meditation, and it'll make all the difference.
All right, cool. Next, we have a question from Julie, and Julie is also here in California. She says, hi, Dada. My question is, how do you combat meditation fatigue? Or is finding something new each time, or pretty much the same thing, part of the practice?
One way of addressing this is doing something different. So, for example, I remember one time I was in Australia, and I'd been meditating regularly for a couple of years, I guess, but I still felt fairly new at it. And I got into this pattern where I was actually falling asleep in my meditation. I'd been going through a sleep deprivation, very intense, over busy kind of period. But even when that finished, I still found I was falling asleep. So that was it was bothering me a lot because I couldn't enjoy my meditation. And so to break that pattern, and I think finding your meditation a bit sort of same-ish might be a similar kind of pattern. To break a pattern, you need to do something different. somebody recommended to me that I go out and sit outside. We live near a river. Sit outside by the river and sit for an hour straight without moving, and it was really tough. But again, it was kind of making that extra effort, and I did it, and it was, it was hard, but I found it broke the pattern. After that, I wasn't falling asleep anymore. So what I would suggest if you're finding your meditations getting monotonous for some reason, do something to give yourself a boost. Either do a really long meditation or go to a really beautiful place by a river or something and meditate there, or go on a retreat. Do something to make it different and make an extra effort. I think the extra effort is the key. That'll take your meditation somewhere new, and it'll become fresh again. I will mention a couple of other things. There are other little things you can do that are maybe not quite as difficult as that. But there's lots of little things you can do to kind of re-inspire yourself. One of them is to read really inspiring spiritual literature. So, you start reading something like the Dada. Now, in our last discussion, I mentioned this idea of, where to get inspiration, where to learn from, what kind of books to go to, the sort of source material. The Dada is one that comes to mind, and this reminds me, actually, the question that I forgot about is something that came out of that discussion. Somebody asked me after I'd said that in the webinar, someone wrote to me and said, well, what particular inspirational books do you recommend? So I think this can also be a way to address this issue of feeling like you're getting in a rut. You read about the experiences of others who've really gone deeply into this, who've had deep spiritual experiences, and it can re-inspire you. So what particular books do I recommend? Certainly the Dada I just mentioned. This is the great Taoist, should you call it, scripture. It's not very long. It's very poetic. It's beautiful. Then the Bhagavad Gita, a really good translation of the Bhagavad Gita. I don't recommend the one that's called the Bhagavad Gita as it is. It's a commentary which is used by the ISKCON organization. It's a kind of a fundamentalist interpretation of the Bhagavad Gita. I would recommend a more standard, translation, the Penguin translation. There are many, but so the Bhagavad Gita, which of course is it's a core scripture in the yoga tradition, certainly in Hinduism. It's from the time of Krishna, who was one of the great gurus of the tantric lineage, you can say, and he's really one of the great deities. He's been deified, and he's been made into a god by the Hindus. So, but the Bhagavad Gita is chapter 18 of the Mahabharata, which is the great epic of India, one of the great epics of India, one of the two main ones. And in chapter 18, the great spiritual figure Krishna is talking to his disciple Arjuna and telling him where it's at in an amazing, revealing way. And they're in the middle of a battlefield, so it's pretty dramatic, and some rather serious questions about life and death and his duty as a warrior come up for Arjuna, and Krishna helps to sort it all out for him. So that's a really inspiring scripture to read if you haven't done that. I'd say that's kind of required reading for a yogi. Another one I really love, this is a much more modern one, but it's written by a yogi, following this great tradition, is the autobiography of a yogi by Paramhansa Yogananda. I think that's a great work. Then some of the books I love from my own tradition very directly, the Jamalpur years. It's the biography of Sri Sri Anandamurti, my guru. That's an amazingly inspiring book, I think, for a lot of people. Then you can go into the more philosophical books. There's a beautiful book called Baba's Grace, which is some of the more devotional, inspirational writings of Anandamurti. Those are nice ones to start with. If you have a more philosophical bent, I would read Elementary Philosophy by Anandamurti. So those are and of course I suppose I should recommend my own book. If you're at the beginning of your meditation, that's really designed as an introductory book. So if you're at that level, I'd be silly not to recommend my own book.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely one that should be on the list. That's what I personally got started with when I started meditation. I love how you mentioned Autobiography of a Yogi. I love so many things written by Yogananda. I think it comes down to it, just basically reading any spiritual text, especially like you said, ones that go farther back that are the source texts. Even if someone reads the Bible, if you read it in a way where you can understand it, not so much literally, but spiritually and the meanings behind each story, there's so much motivation in all of them.
Sure, and actually, Yogananda or his guru Sri Yukteswar, they wrote some beautiful interpretations of the Bible. So you can kind of see the way they explain a lot of the symbolism. If you read that and then you read the Bible again, you might have an appreciation of what it might mean on a deeper level. So, yeah, I agree. I think there are lots of great spiritual scriptures. I tend to favor the sort of the great traditions rather than things that are, well, I live in California. There's a lot of people that seem to imagine that meditation sort of was dreamed up by Californians in the 1960s. It's really not quite like that. A lot of it, most of the books that I see in the spiritual bookstores are derivative. And a lot of them are good, but they're, I like to go to what are they derived from, because that's going to the source. Now, somebody actually asked me another question. I'm remembering the questions I've been asked during the week following our session last week. So this one was, is it better than to, he said, as far as books go, do you think that the older the better? So that's not what I mean. I would say the closer to the source, the better. And I consider the three greatest sources of real spirituality in human history, this is my personal view, were Shiva, who lived about 7,000 years ago, and Krishna, who lived in about 1500 BC, and Anandamurti, my own guru. These are the three great gurus of the ancient Tantra yoga tradition. And if you can get anything, as close as possible to them, that I think would be very, very sound. Not to say that there aren't a lot of other great wisdom teachings, some incredible, the Dhammapada from Buddhism and many others. One of the Tibetan books I love is what's it called? The Tibetan Book of Great Liberation. Not Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Book of Great Liberation. It's pretty tough going, but if you get into it, especially the later part of it, very deep and inspirational. One of the interesting things about Anandamurti's writings, my guru, he wrote really quite in-depth commentaries on the teachings of both Shiva and Krishna. So if you want to get a real handle on what Shiva was about or what Krishna was about, those books are excellent. There's Namami Krishna Sundaram is all about Krishna's teachings, and Namah Shivaya Shantaya is about the teachings of Shiva, which is a pretty mysterious subject because he lived so long ago. There was no writing, 7,000 years ago. So what remains of his teachings is pretty sparse and unclear. So this book is really great. It really helps to clarify what Shiva's teachings, the essence of Shiva's teachings. So that's Namah Shivaya Shantaya. I really recommend that if you want to go deeply into the source material of Tantra.
We're talking about reading from books as a great source, but I know that some of the masters were illiterate, or they just figured it out on themselves. So how important and how much time should be spent studying, researching, taking an intellectual path, and how much time should be devoted elsewhere?
I like that. Yeah, it's true. Of course, before 3,500 years ago, everybody was illiterate because there was no writing, right? And certainly some of the greatest teachers in history, spiritual masters, gurus in history have been illiterate. It's probable that Jesus Christ was illiterate. He was supposedly a carpenter's son. Ramakrishna was supposedly illiterate. He was only, he died in 1890, so that's not so long ago. Spiritual realization shouldn't be confused with intellectual knowledge. we're never going to realize the truth of the universe from a book or through the analytical process. I'm sure of that. Spirituality for me is about cultivating the intuition or our higher sense of a direct access to truth. And so this is done through spiritual practice and through your development as a human being, and your development of your own inner awareness and self-knowledge. That doesn't come from a book. I think the function of spiritual books is to answer our questions so that we can stop asking questions and start meditating. Okay. Secondly, to equip us to answer other people's questions so that we can inspire them to meditate as well, or get them off our backs if they're hassling us, if there's our family and they're concerned about us meditating, so we can explain what we're doing. Right? So what I'm saying here is that a lot of this intellectual content is really just a way of satisfying the intellect. It's useful, it's important, but they're just stepping stones. And of course, it has an inspirational function as well. I mean, I'm a writer. I'm a creative writer. I'm not saying that books have no value or words have no value at all. I just want to make it clear that I don't think you can realize, the deeper truths from books or from intellectual processes at all. In fact, what we're trying to do in meditation is transcend ordinary thinking altogether and experience something in a very different way, as a direct intuitive experience. So I think we need to, use intellectual teachings and philosophy and all these things as a stepping stone to take us somewhere higher. Of course, they can be inspirational, which is what I'm talking about. If you refer back to, the books that you read, these inspirational books, they'll remind you of why, and they'll give you some idea of where you're going, and that can be incredibly inspirational. It might be poetry. The poetry of Rumi, for example, inspires a lot of people to seek something deeper. But it's in Buddhism they talk about confusing the finger with the moon, the finger pointing at the moon. People get hooked on the finger rather than the moon. So the books are a kind of a finger. They're there to point us in a direction. But if we want to really experience spiritual bliss, that means turning your mind inward, not reading a book.
Gotcha. So it's mostly about the practice. You have to put in the work. You have to sit down, figure a lot out on your own, but the books are going to guide you and point you in the right direction.
Sure. And they're important because you need to know what direction you're going in. But once you've got your direction clear, then you need to start walking.
You tied into another question there that we actually promised that we'd answer for people, and I could still use help with it. So can you answer, if your friends start asking about meditation, why you're meditating, what are some tips to explain to family, friends, what you're doing, why you're doing it?
Sure. I think I handled this very badly when I was new at meditation. So I've learned a bit since then. Though I must have done something right, because quite a few of my friends got inspired to learn meditation after I did. But I think that was probably more a function of my enthusiasm than what I actually said. And it's also important to understand why they're asking you. Now, some people, often family or close friends, sometimes they'll ask you because they're just, honestly curious. They want to know why you're doing this, and the question is what it looks like. And that's fine. Then you can start explaining to them the benefits of meditation, what benefits you feel from it, what kind of problem meditation might be helping to solve for you. So these are very tangible. And the obvious things are, meditation makes me feel more relaxed, makes me feel less stressed. I feel happier. I feel I can more empathy with people. I can relate to people more easily. I'm more creative. All these things might come, assuming that is your experience. But what you might also want to keep your antenna up for is close friends or family feeling threatened by what you're doing. So what they're really asking isn't, why are you meditating? It's, are you still going to be my friend? Are you going to change in such a way? Are you going to be going in a different direction? Are you going to run off and become a monk like Dada? They're often the concern is really about their relationship with you, and they don't want it to change. Of course, that's a little bit of a delusion, because relationships evolve and change, or it's a part of life. But people sometimes feel threatened, so you need to be really sensitive to that and try and address that, reassure them. That just because maybe you've changed your diet. I mean, a lot of people, I became a vegetarian when I started getting serious about meditation. And, I gave up smoking marijuana and drinking alcohol. And my friends felt very threatened by that, because that was part of our culture. That was what we did together. And suddenly, I'm being very different. And they were right. I was going to leave their lives. A few months later, I left New Zealand and, went off and took a very different course in life. But, I was a bit of an extreme case, because I was going to go off and become a monk. That's not the course that most people are setting their foot on when they start meditating. So I think it's important to reassure your close friends and family if you think that they might feel a bit threatened by it, or feel that it's somehow going to interfere with your relationship or undermine your connection with them. So, you can answer the questions rationally. And like I said, talk about the benefits. I wouldn't start talking to them about philosophy. Try and make it, as practical as possible. And of course, if they're not sure, then it's easy to, nowadays there's so much research confirming a lot of the benefits of meditation. Mm-hmm. That, it's huge amounts of, thousands of scientific studies demonstrating the benefits of meditation. So there's not so much room for doubt that it actually works.
That answers a lot of questions. I know also sometimes I get carried away when I was first starting, and I love it so much that I try to kind of push it on people or say, hey, everyone should be doing this. And sometimes that doesn't have the best response.
Yeah, try not to be a pain in the neck, Just because you're excited about it doesn't mean that everybody's, it's the right thing for everybody at this point in their lives. But, and especially with close friends or in marriages, I mean, I know many people who've, in a situation where one partner is a meditator and the other isn't. And the one who's meditating, that they're usually the one I know, because throughout, that's the nature of most of my friends. They really want their wife or husband or partner to meditate, but they're also afraid to make them, annoyed. And the situations that I've found work best is where they really restrain themselves. I mean, I know people who've literally waited 10 years and they just meditate, and if their wife or husband asks them about it, yeah, they'll talk about it, but they really actively avoid pushing it. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes after 10 or 15 years, that person comes around of their own accord.
Yeah, that's the most important part. Someone has to come to it on their own. They have to want to do it. The more you try to force feed it to anyone, of course they're not going to want it. They're not ready and open for it. So it would just turn them off eventually. But when they come to it genuinely, then they will appreciate it.
And it won't just turn them off. It can spoil a relationship, which can be pretty bad. Mm-hmm. So I think it's probably good to, on the one hand, yeah, if people ask about it, by all means, offer them information, inspire them, encourage them. But especially in close relationships where there's a whole lot of important emotions and that, tread much more carefully.
All right, that's some great advice. Next, I kind of want to jump back into the questions here. Next is James. And I know James is in New York. He's actually a local full-time volunteer at Ananda Marga Universal Relief Team. And James asks, can you recommend tips to help concentration when it's not so steady during meditation? What do you suggest for keeping the feelings generated during meditations throughout the day? So it looks like we have two questions.
Indeed. So both of these are pretty big questions. The first one is how to improve concentration. The long answer is in my book. I believe that's chapter 4. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay, I get confused about the chapters because I've written 3 editions of that book and the chapters are different in each one. Yeah, so there's a whole book, a whole chapter on concentration. Concentration, okay, there are certain techniques that can really help you to concentrate in meditation, and some of them are very mundane. So I'm going to give you a few tips here, but there are plenty more that you can find in that book or in other teachings, or if you have a teacher, ask them. So the first ones, I'm going to start with the physical ones. Meditate on an empty stomach. Not too empty so that you're really feeling hungry, but if you try and meditate after a big meal, you're going to have a lot of trouble concentrating. So I always try and leave at least 3 hours gap after a meal and my meditation. So this is critical. And of course, in the morning, it's great. You wake up, you haven't eaten for 6 or 8 hours, probably 8. So that's a really good time to meditate first thing in the morning before you eat. So that's a rule I have for myself. It's a rule for us monks, actually, that we meditate before we eat. That's very important. Second, I would say have a cold wash to freshen yourself up. We call it a half bath. So you use the toilet. That's important. It's hard to meditate on a full bladder. And wash your feet and your hands and your face with cold water, and it actually slows down your metabolism and makes it easier to concentrate. There's a thing called the diving reflex. If you take a whole shower, even better, but finish with cool water so that you're not sleepy from having a hot shower. But this diving reflex is something that's been observed in marine mammals. How when they dive, their whole metabolism changes, and it's also a reflex that human beings experience as slightly aquatic mammals. Washing with cold water, and especially when you wash your feet or your from the knees down, from the elbows down, this changes your metabolism and puts you into a state that's easier for meditation. We call it a half bath, or a vyapak shoch in Sanskrit it's called. Then another one is your breathing. I want you to try something right now, as you're listening. See if you can tell which of your nostrils has a stronger flow of air. Just breathe out. Hold your hand here. Breathe out. And see which nostril has a stronger flow of air. If you have a stronger flow of air through your left nostril, your concentration and meditation will be easier. Sounds weird? It's a fact. I'm not going to go into the details. You can read my article on it. It's called The Nose. That's N-O-S-E. The second nose is K-N-O-W-S. So that's an article on my blog. So those are a few practical tips from a physical perspective. Or the other one is if you practice yoga postures, yoga asanas regularly. And again, they should be the yoga postures, the way that we teach them in Ananda Marga, in my tradition. Our founder, our guru, selected the yoga postures that support a meditation practice. Believe it or not, there are some yoga practices, yoga asanas or postures, that actually make your mind more restless. So, if you want to know which ones, you have to refer to a book called Charya Part 3. It's one of the Ananda Marga books. It has 40 asanas, 40 yoga postures. Those ones are selected because they will actually support your meditation practice. So those are some of the physical things. And they're some of the key ones. They can make a huge difference. There are more, but let's start with those. Let's have a look at mental things. So concentration, mental practices, kirtan. I've already talked about the chanting. This can help to bring your emotions into line so that you can really start off your meditation with the right kind of mood. That makes a great deal of difference. Sitting, back to physical ones. Sit straight. It's very important. Be reasonably comfortable when you're sitting. If you're too uncomfortable, that's not going to help. At the same time, don't be too comfortable. I don't recommend trying to meditate lying down. Sitting straight with a straight spine is the best posture for meditation. Then I think just taking a determination, really saying, when you sit down, just feeling, okay, this period of time, if it's 20 minutes or half an hour, or you might be doing longer, this time is devoted to my meditation practice. It doesn't belong to anything else. It doesn't belong to my employer. It doesn't belong to my spouse. It's my time, and this is what I'm going to focus on. So that you take this kind of little determination when you start and really make that extra effort, and that makes a big difference, actually. Rather than just sort of sitting down, oh, meditation time, I hope I get this, I hope this 20 minutes passes quickly. That's not going to, that attitude isn't going to help you very much. Really treat it as a special time, give it your full attention, and believe it or not, just having that attitude can make a big difference. Then there are also techniques within your practice, but that's more a personal thing. Like once you start getting personal lessons in your meditation in the way that we teach it, there are certain techniques or lessons that you learn that really help concentration. One of them, we teach a series of 6 lessons usually. They're taught one-to-one, but that's all, you know, outside of the scope of an online teaching or even a group, because they're taught one-to-one. But those techniques can really help with concentration, particularly the 3rd lesson if you have that, and the 5th lesson. If you practice that intensely, that'll improve your concentration. So those are a few points about how to improve your concentration in your practice. Now the second question was about how to keep the feeling that you know, presumably the good feeling that you might generate in your meditation, how to hold on to it, how to keep it during the rest of the day. Well, again, the magic of kirtan, chanting. I have a very dear friend. He's one of my students, but he's really a great friend now. I got to tell you an experience he had, actually. He tells this story better than anybody, but I can't get him to put it on video. Because he does it spontaneously. So I think you know this one, Akhilesh, right?
Yeah, I heard it at the retreat just the other weekend. It was great.
Yeah, it's this amazing story about how to use kirtan to help to improve your everyday, your mood and your feeling during the day. So he came on his first weekend retreat, or it might have been a day seminar or something. And now before coming, he'd learned meditation. He was practicing it, and he came for the event. And as he was leaving, one of the other people attending it, one woman recommended to him, "Oh, why don't you get one of these kirtan CDs, one of these chanting CDs with really nice music, and listen to it in your car. You'll feel more relaxed when you get to work and that." Now, what had happened was my friend, his name's Mike. He in his car, his CD player was broken. It stuck. There was a Beatles CD stuck inside it. It had been stuck there for 3 months or something. He hadn't gotten around to fixing it. And he's a very busy guy. He has a very intense job. And he said, you know, he'd start work very early. He'd be on the phone on the way to work, driving his car like a weapon, as he puts it. And, you know, it wasn't a restful experience. Anyway, his CD player's stuck. So he says to the lady, well, look, there's no point in getting a CD. I can't play it in my car because it doesn't work anyway. But then at the last minute, he bought the CD on an impulse. He comes down to the parking lot, opens the door to his car, and the Beatles CD has popped out. And he took that as a sign. He thought, okay, I can't ignore this. This is too crazy. So he started listening to the kirtan CD on the way to work and coming back from work. And he said it completely changed the way that he felt about being in that place. He got to work relaxed. He wasn't talking on the phone. He got to work. He was feeling in a better mood. And somehow, even though he wasn't spending that half hour driving on the phone to contractors and that, his work went better. It went more smoothly. People were like being around him more because he was in a better mood and he felt more relaxed and calm. And he even created a little meditation space in his office because he was the boss, so he could do what he wanted in his office, so that he could meditate after work before coming home rather than driving through the traffic. So he'd meditate while the traffic's dying down and then come home more quickly. So, you know, he integrated his practice into a very demanding, busy, professional kind of job. So kirtan's one way you can really keep that feeling. And the other is to remember your mantra. Now, if you have a personal mantra, it'll be synchronized with your breathing. One syllable on the in-breath and one on the out-breath. And this is something you can keep going all the time when you're just walking or doing something mundane, washing the dishes, or doing something that doesn't really require a lot of mental attention. So you just keep the mantra going in your mind as a kind of a half meditation, and that'll keep that feeling with you. That's another way. There are a lot of ways, little tricks you can use, but that's two of the key ways. And mantra is very central to the practice that we teach, and it can be used both in meditation and outside meditation to really enhance how you feel all the time.
That was great. I already feel it just from thinking about the mantra and the kirtan. Those are definitely best ways to keep it going throughout your day. I personally have been feeling that for the past week as I practice it more and more.
Cool.
I also like to listen to kirtan before you go to sleep. I think it's a great thing to mix in throughout your day while you're working on the computer. And again, it just creates that atmosphere that's peaceful, relaxing. I remember the first time I listened to it before bed, I only slept maybe 5 hours because I had to get up for work, and I felt like I slept for 10. So that's great.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it reminds me of another really cool trick, and that is it's easy to do now on your a smartphone or a computer. You can set up an alarm to play the music you want when you wake up. And you know how the first thing you hear in the morning tends to stick in your head?
Yeah.
Right? That's why I have kirtan wake me up. So if you want to have it sort of going in the background automatically, set your alarm with a favorite kirtan tune, and that can really enhance your mood in the day, and it's easy.
All right, great. So we have about 15 minutes left in this hour, so we have 2 more questions that we should get through on here, and we'll wrap it up pretty soon. So the next question here is from Mike. Mike asked, is there a place before or during meditation for sounds designated to move the brain from beta into alpha or theta waves, parentheses, a more calm, creative state?
So I don't tend to correlate meditation states with the brainwave patterns. I know there is a correlation between them, but I don't think of it like that because I don't know enough about them. I know the basics. And certainly there's been a lot of research demonstrating that when people go into deeper meditation states, the these different brainwaves become dominant. But as far as sort of steps to go into meditation, so you're kind of going into a deeper state, I think that well, some of the things I mentioned, again, a lot of them are very practical. Take it in the morning. I always love to take a shower first, so that already changes the state of mind. You're awake, but you're kind of feeling fresh, and so you're awake but alert. You're calm but alert to some degree after a nice shower. You feel good. That's really important. Then the kirtan, puts you in the mood, and just sometimes if you're in a group, but we in our house here we do a dance with the kirtan and sing together every morning before we meditate. It's great, but we're kind of lucky because we live in a meditation center. It's not always possible, but definitely kirtan for the meditation. And then in the meditation itself, if you have a personal meditation technique, the way that we teach it, there's a sort of visualization that takes you into a deeper state before you start really using the mantra. So all of these things are designed to as a process, as a series of steps to take you into a deeper, calmer meditation state. So just use them.
Last question, I'll share my screen one more time. This one was from last week. It's actually your birthday, so we have a ton of posts on here. So happy birthday one more time. But this question here, looks like his name, and sorry if I pronounce it wrong, is Kai. And Kai asks, my question, please share what is the most important for people, according to your experience, to turn an individual meditation practice or sadhana into a real action affecting the society/world? Many thanks.
Wow, that's a powerful question. That's I know him as Karun, a very dear young friend living in Taiwan, and I'll tell you something about him in a minute. That's something kind of cool. So that question is really, really important. So for me, meditation is just a part of what makes life meaningful for me. It's key because it enables me to do a lot of other things. And one of them is it enables me to see clearly, more clearly, I should say, how I can have the best possible impact on the world. So I kind of used meditation in the first years as a way of developing my own insight into what I should do with my life. So it became a tool to help me to get clarity on how I could do the greatest possible good with the next 80 years or whatever it's going to be. So I think that's kind of addressing Karun's question to some degree. So meditation is sometimes called intuitional practice, or this whole yoga lifestyle that includes meditation as a core practice, but includes also the yoga postures, the whole kind of ethical system of yoga, the health practices, the community, social service, and really trying to lead a life of service. All of these things are a part of the yoga lifestyle. That's sometimes called intuitional science. So what it does, it cultivates this higher sensibility. It helps you to understand yourself better. It also helps you to see through a lot of the kind of delusions that we develop about the world and a lot of the delusions that are imposed on us. So what this means is it can help people to be more free and less easily manipulated. Now, how are people manipulated by vested interests? A company wants you to buy their product. They use human psychology to make you want it, right? That's the science behind advertising and marketing and all of that. If you have greater self-awareness and you're not so addicted to things, and you're not so addicted to things being, the idea that external objects or buying something is going to make you happy, you become more free of that kind of manipulation. You're more free to make your own decisions that are, based on your own values. So I think that the meditation practice can have a very deep long-term effect of helping you to lead a purposeful life, rather than being a person who's easily led by people that want to manipulate them just for their own selfish interest. So it's really it can be a tool that equips you to become the kind of person you really want to be. And at the same time, it's giving you more access to other faculties. It's developing your willpower. It's developing your creative thinking. It can improve memory. It's becoming more and more clear that meditation is good for your brain, and your brain is a rather useful instrument that you need to do all kind of things in life. So it can help give you clarity, vision, and the kind of mental equipment that you need to do something great.
One more thing to add with that, in your interview with Dr. Doty, the very last question you asked him, he touched on it as well, where you don't have to see it as changing the world as something huge. There's a lot of power that every single person has every day, and just by taking that great feeling from your meditation practice and bringing it out into the world, looking someone in the eyes, smiling at them, starting a conversation, very small acts of kindness create a small ripple that can be passed on and create a much bigger change.
Yep, I think that's a powerful idea.
I know that you have your Close Your Eyes and Meditation book. Now you're doing these webinars and trying to give a lot of information out to people online. I think the video format is great. What's next? What else are you planning to do? How are you going to spread this meditation practice and get people actually practicing and feeling the benefits?
So I've got a few things happening. There's kind of three. One of them is a series of Q&A videos where I took 26 frequently asked questions. Well, actually, some of them were frequently asked questions, and some of them were what I call should ask questions. So they're the questions that people don't know they ought to ask. So I took a bunch of those, and with the help of my really good friend Lila Meyer in Canada, we filmed me answering all of those. So they're each like just 2 to 3 minutes, and I'm going to post those on YouTube and put them out there. The first one we just released today actually, but in the next couple of weeks we'll be releasing all of those. So that's just a nice little, lots of little bits of information to help clarify what meditation is and how you can begin to practice it. The next is something, again, I was working with my friend Leela Meyer filming just in the last week. I was in Canada with him for 9 days, and we filmed a new series. I call it the Enlightened Leader Project. It's about how to develop the qualities of love, creativity, and wisdom through meditation, and it's addressed particularly towards people in positions of leadership and influence, so that that will have a greater impact because they have influence. So that's a work in progress. That's got a lot of editing and that to be done, but we did all the production work on that last week. But the project that's taking up a lot of my mental space and yours as well, because I know you've been helping to create this whole thing, is taking the content of my book, Close Your Eyes and Open Your Mind, and the workbook and the whole meditation home study course that I developed 2 years ago based on that, which includes the audio book, includes a whole lot of exercises and a whole lot of guided meditation recordings, taking all that content and reorganizing it into an online course. It's a 2-month course, and what research has shown as far as learning things is that a little bit every day is much more effective than a big chunk once a week. So what we've done is break all that content down, and it'll be delivered in a daily email for 60 days for people who want to get established in a meditation practice. And we're pretty excited about it, aren't we? I think it's going to really help a lot of people to establish their own regular practice at home. And we'll be launching that in the next week or two, and we'll let you know about it. And please tell your friends, because I think this is something that is going to be a very effective tool for helping people to really get the benefit of this practice.
I'm really excited about that as well. I personally got to go through all your material. I got your book over here, the home study guide, and with all the access to the guided meditations, I found that it was helpful for myself over the past 2 months being here. And I'm really excited to see the feedback that we've been getting so far with it. And I'd love to see other people join me and the community that we already have, and together helping each other to sustain a practice every day and seeing where we can take it over the next few weeks to months.
It's actually a couple of nice little add-ons to that. We're having some people beta test it at the moment, and helping us to improve it before we launch it. And one of them is my niece from New Zealand. Her name's Becca, and she's really smart. She's got a PhD in psychology, and she specializes in behavioral change. And of course, what we're trying to do here is get people to change their behavior very specifically, so that they start meditating eventually twice a day, once and then twice a day. So she's been giving us fantastic feedback on how to design the course to maximize the odds of it actually working, so that people really do start practicing. So her feedback's been invaluable. So that's been exciting. And I said I would tell you something about my friend Karun in Taiwan. So he and his partner Anima, I met them when they visited the US, and they're really such lovely young people. I'm very fond of them. We talk on Skype, and they're really good friends. And they're organizing a big tour for me in Taiwan at the end of next year. So they're going to republish my book in Chinese. It came out in Chinese some years ago, but the new edition is not out. So they're going to publish that, and then organize a whole tour with some concerts and big meditation workshops and sort of media stuff, launching the book in Chinese. So that's kind of exciting for me, because I love Taiwan. I've been there a few times, and there is a great meditation tradition in Chinese culture as well, of course. So a lot of people there really appreciate it, and it's a fabulous culture. And Taiwan is actually the most educated population in the world. They have a higher percentage of postgraduate degree holders than any other country. So they're smart, studious, and very wonderful people to work with. So I'm looking forward to that.
All right, great. So that pretty much wraps it up for today. I just wanted to say thanks personally. I know last week there were some technical difficulties on my side. Dada and I are new to this, and we're learning as we go, and we really want to do more things like this and get direct questions from you, things that you want to work on. So I'd like to just put another question out there and really ask you guys to speak up and to let Dada know, what else do you want? What do you want next? What things you want him to work on? Do you like question and answers like this? We really just want to hear from you guys.
Thank you, everybody, for listening and joining us. And this is being recorded, so this will be up for the replay. So if you have friends that would like to, listen to this, that you think would learn from it, you can pass it on to them.
All right.
Thanks so much, Akhilesh. I've enjoyed this conversation. It's been great.
Yeah, it's been awesome.
All right. We'll see you all next time. Not sure when. Probably next week we'll have another webinar. We'll let you know. Farewell.